All right, homie. So this is how I made the Bible make sense to me, right? And for people who aren't particularly religious, might seem a little far out for them. But if you've had an awakening, you're already at the point where you understand there's a lot more to the world than what we thought we saw before, right? This sort of cosmetic, superficial mask that the world has on, right? It's deeper than that. And since you've obviously had an awakening, I mean, now it became apparent to me today, you've had an awakening, then you already know this to a certain extent. So this is one thing I came across that I found the most valuable lesson in my awakening thus far. And that's Genesis 3. Genesis 3, you would know it as when Eve bites the apple, okay? Now, when you go into the Hebrew, there's some issues with this translation. And I'm going to make it make sense for you in what I think it means, okay? Now, back then, you know how we call a tree a family tree, right? Still to this day, we use that language, family tree. So, the tree of knowledge and wisdom. What tree has knowledge and wisdom? There's no fucking tree has knowledge and wisdom, right? And if you're familiar with the Bible, you know the Bible mentions Nephilim 7 times. Nephilim, okay? Nephilim are when the fallen angels, right, mate with human women. And they have these sort of hybrid offspring, right, progeny. So this is going to get a little deep, but just bear with me and just trust me, okay? Trust me on this. So, tree is a family tree, okay? The word eat in Hebrew, I believe it's nagash. The word that they use for eat means to lay with, to have sexual relations. It also means eat, but it also means to lay with, to have sexual relations. And then so when it says Eve ate of the tree, you could, when Eve ate of the tree of knowledge and wisdom could also be translated as Eve did lay with, right, someone of the tree of knowledge and wisdom, which would be the fallen angels, right? And then another thing is Cain gets born, and Cain is the first murderer. He murders Abel, okay? And then after that, Adam and Eve, they have Seth. Seth is the only one who's ever called Adam's child. You know how the Bible goes with monotonous regularity, even right into the New Testament in the Greek. This one begat that one, this one begat that one, this one begat that one. It never says that Adam begat Cain. Right? And what happens right after Genesis 3? What's the very next thing that they tell you that happens after Eve takes a bite of this tree that has knowledge and wisdom? What kind of tree has knowledge and wisdom? And then right after that, God comes down to Adam and Eve and says, "What have you done?" And then goes right to the devil and says, "I will make enmity between your seed and her seed." What seed? What seed? What seed? I thought she bit an apple. Why did you storm right over to Satan and start talking about his children if the translation isn't what I suspect that it is? And not me personally. I mean, there's been hundreds of thousands of pastors and priests and stuff who go by this translation, but it gets censored, just like Flat Earth gets censored, just like so many of the shit you've tried to study. COVID gets censored. No different, right? So we know Nephilim are a thing. We know my translation makes much more sense. And then you can even take it into the New Testament. Like Jesus says, "Ye are not of the Father," when he's speaking to the Jews. "Ye are not of the Father. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do." Ye are not my sheep. My sheep know my voice, and they follow me. Ye are not of my sheep. Paul says to the Jews, we are innocent of thy blood. But Paul was an Israelite. So how would he be innocent of the blood of Judahites, who are also Israelites? None of that would make any sense if my translation of the Bible is incorrect. You see? It's the only way the Bible makes sense. And there are some other things that you could go back and forth on, but when you add it in with the context, the Jews are the sons of Satan, Satan himself. And that's why they're destroying the world. That's why Bill Gates, as a Jew, as an ethnic Jew, has no problem poisoning the sky, poisoning your food, and fucking all this sick shit, That's why these Jews have been crucifying Christians and, fucking adrenochrome and all this disgusting, insane, satanic shit, dude. Because they literally are satanic. Literally, dude. I try to tell people this shit and, they really don't understand. And if they haven't had an awakening, it's way too much for them to take in. Only someone who's had an awakening can go this far. You might get a normie to fucking question the moon landing. You know what I'm saying? But going this far, they just can't get there. They can't wrap their head around it yet. You sort of need baby steps, But, yeah, man, that's the truth. And then when you know that, like I said, the rest of the Bible makes sense. And the nature of what we're battling against. The nature of these Jews. And why they are the way that they are. Because they're not of us. And they know that they're doomed. That's why, dude. That's what's going on in the world, That's why they poison us. That's why they get us hooked on these drugs and pump our children, inoculate them with 200 vaccines and give them all autism, and retardation and Down syndrome and every other fucking thing. That's why, dude. Dead ass.